What do you do when you know the right thing to do, but doing it might cost you everything? That's the question Pontius Pilate faced on the morning he stood before a restless crowd, holding the fate of Jesus of Nazareth in his hands. He wasn't a priest, he wasn't a prophet, he wasn't even a Jew. Pilate was a Roman governor, sent to keep order, collect taxes, and squash rebellion. He wasn't there to make moral decisions. But on that day, he made one of the most consequential decisions in human history. And it's a decision that still echoes through churches, cathedrals, and creeds across the world. Suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. But who was Pilate? Why did he hesitate? Why did he ultimately give in? Was he a spineless politician, a conflicted soul trying to avoid injustice, or a symbol of what happens when power and fear drown out the voice of truth? Today, we're going beyond the surface, into the complex, uneasy heart of Pilate's story. We'll explore the historical records, the gospel accounts, and the subtle signs of a man torn between pressure and conscience. Because Pilate wasn't just a side character, he was the last barrier between Jesus and the cross, and what he chose to do, or not do, teaches us something powerful about fear, responsibility, and the dangerous comfort of silence. So, if you've ever wondered how someone could see the truth and still turn away, or if you've ever faced a moment where doing the right thing came at a cost, this story is for you. If you're drawn to deeper stories like this, if you want more than surface-level faith, take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to Signs and Scripture. We're here to uncover the soul of every Bible story and the truth that still speaks. Let's begin. To understand Pilate's dilemma, we have to understand where and when he was operating. Pilate was the Roman governor, technically the prefect, of Judea from around 26 to 36 AD. Now, that might sound like a normal political appointment, but governing Judea was no easy task. Rome saw the region as a pressure cooker, a place filled with tension, religion, resistance, and fierce national identity. The Jewish people were under Roman occupation, but they never accepted it quietly. Their loyalty was to Yahweh, not Caesar. And while Roman rule tolerated many religions, Judea was different. This was the land of the temple, the Torah, and the promise of a coming Messiah. Now enter Pilate, appointed by Emperor Tiberius with one job: keep the peace and protect Roman interests. He wasn't there to make friends. He had a reputation even outside the Bible for being ruthless. The historian Philo described him as inflexible, stubborn, and cruel. Josephus, another first-century Jewish historian, tells us Pilate had clashed with the Jews more than once. He brought Roman military standards with pagan symbols into Jerusalem, and even used temple funds to build an aqueduct. So when we meet Pilate in the Gospels, it's not the story of a stranger. It's the story of a man already walking on political eggshells. The Passover festival only made things worse. Every year, thousands of Jews flooded Jerusalem to remember God's deliverance from Egypt. It was a deeply spiritual time, filled with messianic hope and tension. Rome dreaded Passover week. Pilate likely traveled from his normal headquarters in Caesarea to Jerusalem just for this, staying at Herod's palace to keep an eye on the crowds. Because if a riot broke out, if someone claimed to be the king of the Jews, it wasn't just a religious issue, it was a threat to Roman control. So when the religious leaders dragged Jesus before Pilate, accusing him of sedition and claiming he called himself a king, Pilate was already walking a tightrope. All four Gospels describe Pilate's interaction with Jesus. Each gives us a slightly different angle, but all point to a common theme. Pilate didn't think Jesus deserved death. Let's begin with John's account, one of the most detailed. Early in the morning, Jesus is brought to the Roman governor's headquarters. But the religious leaders won't step inside. They don't want to be made unclean before the Passover. So Pilate, ironically the pagan, is forced to go back and forth between Jesus and the crowd. He asks the leaders, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They dodge the question. "If he weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." Already, the tension is high. Pilate tells them to judge Jesus by their own laws, but they want him executed, and under Roman law, only Pilate could authorize capital punishment. So Pilate questions Jesus directly. He asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus responds with a question of his own. "Is that your idea, or did others tell you about me?" It's the beginning of a strange, almost mystical conversation. Jesus tells Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world, that he came to testify to the truth, and that everyone on the side of truth listens to him. Pilate replies with a sigh, "What is truth?" That line, just 3 words, has echoed through history, not as a philosophical reflection, but as a tragic shrug, as if to say, "Truth? What's the use? Who can know anything for sure in this messy political world?" And that's where Pilate stands, caught between truth and power, between conviction and convenience. He tells the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against him." But the leaders insist. So Pilate tries to find a way out. There's a custom during Passover. Release one prisoner to the people. Pilate offers them a choice: Jesus or Barabbas, a known rebel and murderer. Surely they'll choose Jesus. But the crowd, whipped into a frenzy, shouts, "Give us Barabbas!" It's a moment that feels almost surreal. Pilate, this seasoned Roman official, has lost control of the narrative. He knows Jesus is innocent. Even his wife sends him a message. "Don't have anything to do with that righteous man, for I've suffered many things in a dream because of him." But the pressure only increases. The leaders accuse Pilate of being no friend of Caesar if he lets Jesus go. A veiled threat, a political warning. Let this man go, and you might be seen as siding with a rebel king. At this point, Pilate is stuck between an innocent man and an angry mob. His attempts to reason, to delay, even to offer a violent substitute in Barabbas have all failed. And so he turns to another strategy. He orders Jesus to be flogged. Maybe, if the crowd sees Jesus bloodied, scourged with the Roman whip, humiliated, mocked, maybe then they'll be satisfied. The soldiers twist a crown of thorns, press it into his head, and drape a purple robe across his torn back. Then they mock him, hitting him and shouting, "Hail, King of the Jews!" It's a brutal spectacle, not justice, but a political performance. Pilate brings Jesus back out and says, "Behold the man." But it doesn't work. The religious leaders only shout louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate says again, "I find no basis for a charge against him." He's almost pleading now, but the pressure intensifies. The crowd claims Jesus made himself the Son of God, and that, according to their law, is blasphemy. This rattles Pilate. John tells us that when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. He goes back to Jesus again. "Where are you from?" he asks. But Jesus gives no answer. Pilate presses him. "Don't you realize I have power to free you or crucify you?" And Jesus responds with calm, unsettling clarity, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above." At that moment, Pilate knows he's dealing with someone beyond his understanding. But still, he doesn't act with courage. He hesitates. He wavers. And when the crowd threatens his political standing, "If you release him, you are no friend of Caesar," he folds. He brings Jesus out, sits on the judge's seat, and says, "Here is your king." But they shout him down, "We have no king but Caesar." And so, in a final act of false innocence, Pilate washes his hands in front of the crowd and declares, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." Then, he hands Jesus over to be crucified, a judge claiming to absolve himself, while sending an innocent man to die. Pontius Pilate is one of the most morally conflicted figures in the New Testament, not because he was confused, but because he was convinced and still did the wrong thing. Let's pause and look deeper. From a historical standpoint, Pilate was a Roman official. His job wasn't to uphold Jewish law, it was to keep order and protect Rome's interest. He was given power, but not security. If things went badly, he could be recalled, or worse. And by the time Jesus stood before him, Pilate's record in Judea was already rocky. We know from other sources, like Philo and Josephus, that Pilate had a pattern of provoking the Jewish people. He brought in Roman images to Jerusalem. He seized temple funds. He cracked down with harsh force. So, when the religious leaders showed up that morning, Pilate had reason to be cautious. A riot during Passover could be the final straw. A bad report sent back to Tiberius, and Pilate might lose his post or his head. He wasn't trying to save Jesus. He was trying to save himself. But here's what makes his story so tragic. He knew Jesus was innocent. He said it multiple times. He tried to avoid responsibility. He even received a supernatural warning from his wife. Yet, Pilate tried to wash his hands of the matter, as if morality could be outsourced, as if responsibility could be delegated. In truth, Pilate did what so many do when faced with a costly truth. He delayed, he deflected, and eventually he surrendered, not to conviction, but to convenience. Let's think about that famous line. What is truth? It's often quoted as a philosophical question, but in Pilate's mouth it sounds more like an excuse, a way to dodge the discomfort of clarity, because truth wasn't far away. It was standing right in front of him. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever had a moment like that, where truth was right in front of you, but following it would have cost you something? Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was your job. Maybe it was your comfort or reputation. What did you do? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because Pilate's story isn't just about ancient politics, it's about us. The climax of Pilate's story is not a moment of courage, it's a moment of surrender. He hands Jesus over, not because he believes Jesus is guilty, but because he's afraid of losing control. He tries to escape the consequences with a bowl of water and a public ritual. But history doesn't forget. Pilate becomes a permanent fixture in the Christian creed, suffered under Pontius Pilate. He tried to erase his responsibility, but in the end, his name is bound forever to the crucifixion of Christ. He became what he feared, a man remembered not for his power, but for his failure to use it rightly.